Okay, let's talk about finding the circumference of a circle. So starting with a couple circles here. So again, we've seen this shape many times. This is the center of the circle right there, that dot. And if I go from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle, that is what we call the radius, or a radius, right? I don't have to start at that center and go to this point. I could start at this center and go to this point, let's say. So this would be another radius. Right? When we have more than one radius, we call them radii. There's two or more of a radius. Okay. I could, instead of starting from the center and going out to the edge, I could start at one point on the circle, go through the center and go straight out to the other side. That is called a diameter. Again, I could have done that from any point on the edge of the circle. So let's say I took this one and went through the center and out to the other side. That is also called a diameter, right? So it's not that there's only one, it's just usually we only draw one in the center, but there are infinitely many diameters because there are infinitely many points on the edge of the circle for us to start at and then go to the other side. And then same thing here. There's not just a single radius, although we usually only draw one. Okay, so let's get to talking about the circumference. All right, so we have a circle. When we measure the circumference, right, C-I-R-C-U-M-F-E-R-E-N-C-E. When we measure the circumference, what we're doing is we're trying to find the distance around the edge of the circle. Right, this is equivalent to when we talk about a polygon. Let's say we've got a pentagon here, really any polygon, and we want to find the perimeter. So the perimeter takes and adds up all the edges of the polygon. In memory work, we say add all sides. So the circumference is doing the same thing, except there's not sides plural like there is here. There's just one edge that goes around the outside of the circle. So circumference is to a circle what perimeter is to a polygon. Okay, so when we talk about finding the circumference, we've got two different formulas that we use. We have circumference equals, sorry, I was getting ready to say the area here. Circumference is 2 times pi times the radius. And the other one that we use is circumference equals pi times diameter. All right, D for diameter, R for radius. Now these are equivalent. Let's talk about why. If I take and I rewrite this one, I'm going to use the commutative property of multiplication to switch the pi and the R around. This would become 2 times R times pi. Here comes our special kitty visitor. It would be 2r times pi. Well, let's look at 2r. If we go back to our circle right here, we drew this radius right here. If we had shot out in the opposite direction and gone to the edge right there, this, from this point through the center out to the other side, would be a diameter. So these two radii together make up one diameter, all right? So I could replace 2r with d. And then it would become the same as this formula right here, pi times diameter. Okay, so let's go through and do some practice problems on this sheet right here, which you should have a copy of. Again, I'm going to write the formulas at the top. So circumference equals 2 pi r, or circumference equals pi times diameter. Now let's look at these pictures for just a second. And you can see hopefully why we have these two formulas right here. So this one, they give us the diameter. We're going to use pi times diameter. This one, they give us the radius. So we're going to use circumference equals 2 times pi times radius, and so forth. So depending on which we're given, the diameter or the radius, will help us decide which formula we're going to use. I would say if you had to memorize one, I would choose that one to do, although it doesn't really matter. I think that one's the more popular one because most often you're given the radius. But I think if you only had room in your brain for one, I would choose that one because it's easy to double a radius to get a diameter. But sometimes, for example, in here, it's a little bit less easy to cut the diameter in half to use that formula. Here we've got an odd number, so we would end up with half of a diameter, or half of 13, which we would then double again. It doesn't really make sense to have it and then double it. So I would say that this one is more practical, but this one is more well-known. All right, but usually most people just memorize both. Okay, so again, I'm going to encourage you to write down the formula you're going to use. In this case, it's going to be circumference equals pi times diameter. Oh, and I forgot to say something here. Find the exact circumference of each circle. So let's think back to when we've talked about pi. Right, we've approximated pi. This is back when we found the volume of a cone earlier in the year. We approximated pi to be 3.14 as a decimal, or we approximated it as a fraction to be 22/7. Right, and for most of the work that we do, if not all of the work that we do, these two are very good approximations. Right, but sometimes they say find the exact circumference of a circle, or the exact area of a circle, or the exact volume of a sphere, or something like that. When they say the word exact, what they mean is do not use one of these approximations for pi, just use pi. So when they say exact, it means leave pi in your answer. Now, since that is not always true, they don't always say find the exact circumference of your circle. Some worksheets will say find exact, some will say round your answer to the nearest tenth, some will say use 22/7 for pi. They'll give all different things. So I would like us to do these two following the directions, numbers 1 and 2. And 4 and 5, we're going to bend the directions a little bit just so that we get practiced with these. All right, so when you see other instructions elsewhere that tell you to do it like this or this, you'll be prepared. Okay, so for right now, we're going to do exact. So it's telling us use circumference equals pi times diameter. And we're just going to fill in what we know and leave the variable for what we don't know. So we don't know circumference, we'll leave it as a C. We are not going to change pi because it tells us to use the exact value. And then we're going to fill in for diameter 13. This is kind of weird written that way. Usually we write all the numbers first and then any other symbols after it. So symbols for pi, if we have a variable, if we have a square root, like a square root of 3 that we couldn't simplify, all those come at the end. The number comes first. So the more proper way to write that would be 13 pi. All right, now we have to write the units that go along with this. So circumference is just measuring a length of something. So it's not square units like we would for area or cubic units like we would for volume. We're just going to say this is 13 pi yards. And that would be our final answer. All right, let's do the number 2. Again, we're going to leave pi in our answer. This time we're going to use this formula, circumference equals 2 pi r, because we're given the radius. All right, we don't know circumference, that's what we're trying to find. 2 is just 2. Pi we're going to leave because they told us they wanted the exact. And for r, we're going to write 3. And again, multiplication is commutative, so I'm going to swap those two. Again, you don't need to write this step. You could just say, oh, I know 2 times 3. But I'm going to write it out so that you just see that I'm just swapping these two. Now the 2 times 3 is together, and we're going to write that as circumference equals 6 pi. And again, 6 pi what? 6 pi feet. It's just a length, so it's not squared or cubed. Okay, let's go down to number 4. All right, for number 4, I'm going to use pi is approximately equal to 3.14. Again, I realize I'm not following the instructions, but I want you to get practice with this. So here we're going to take, since we know the radius, it's going to be circumference equals 2 pi r. And I'm going to fill in what I know. So circumference equals 2 times, for pi we're going to use 3.14, and for r it's 17. All right, be careful with these multiplication symbols and the decimals. Remember that this is a decimal, these are multiplication. If it helps, put that in parentheses so that you remember it's a decimal. All right, I'm going to do 2 times 17 first, so I get circumference equals 34 times 3.14. Let's do that off to the side. 3.14 times 34. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 1 is 4 plus 1 is 5. 4 times 3 is 12. Put down the 0. 3 times 4 is 12. Put down the 2, carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 6, 7, 6, 10. 2 places behind the decimal, we go over here. So this is 106.76. And it's feet. Sorry, that's awfully smushy in there. 106.76 feet is the approximate length of the circumference. All right, and for this one, let's use pi is approximately 22/7 just to get use with that. So this one we're going to choose circumference equals pi times diameter. And then we'll fill in what we know. Circumference equals 22/7 times 15. I'm going to write that as 15 over 1. Then there's nothing that will cancel here, so I'm just going to do 7 times 1 is 7 for the denominator. In the numerator, it's going to be 22 times 15. 5 times 2 is 10. It's 11, 0, 2, 2. So that gives us 330. So I would be fine with you writing 330/7. If you wanted to write it as a mixed number, you could then divide 330 by 7. That would go in 4 times, that's 28. That would be 5. 7 goes into that 7 times, that's 49. And that's 1/7. So you could write either 330/7 or you could write 47 and 1/7 as your answer. I'm going to go with 330/7. And then it would be inches. Okay, and then I'm not going to do these right now. I'm going to leave 3, 6, 7, and 8 for you. But here they just ask you a problem in words and they don't give you a picture. So for example, a bike wheel has a diameter of 10 inches. What's the circumference? You just have to go the extra step here and draw the bike wheel as the circle and just put that it has a diameter of 10 inches. That is a very tiny bike wheel. But you have to draw the picture first, all right? And then it's just asking, what is the circumference of the wheel? Again, the instructions here are going to say exact. So you can leave it as exact for these two. For problem number 6, I want you to do it with 3.14. This, I want you to do exact. And then let's say this exact. And this one will say use pi is approximately 22/7. Oops, you can't even see what I just wrote there. All right, so up here for number 3, I wrote exact. For number 6, I wrote use approximate pi equals 3.14. And here exact for number 7, and here for number 8, 22/7. Okay, good luck.